Hear me better when I stand, so what I'll do is I'll use this. I think that it's best to start right away with the lecture so that there is some time left for questions afterwards. As you may know, the study of argumentation is prospering at the moment. This is a remarkable and also a fortunate fact, because during a long period of neglect, the study of argumentation seemed to have disappeared forever from the academic stage. After its brilliant start in antiquity, highlighted in the classical works of Aristotle, and after an alternation of ups and downs during the following millennia, in the post-Renaissance period, its gradual decline set in. Revitalization took place only after Stephen Toulmin, and Perelman published in the same year, 1958, their landmark works. Toulmin's book, The Uses of Argument, and Perelman's book, published together with Albrecht's Titeka, La Nouvelle Rhétorique. Toulmin's model of argumentation and Perelman's inventory of argumentation techniques inspired a great many scholars in various ways to take up the study of argumentation in a serious manner. Nowadays, there are well-established formal as well as informal logical approaches to argumentation, but also communicative, linguistic, social, psychological, juridical, and other approaches. Traces of the influence of the classical and neoclassical argumentation theories just mentioned can be found in most of these approaches. It's a truism, recognized from antiquity onwards, that argumentation arises in response to or in anticipation of differences of opinion, whether this difference of opinion is real or merely imaginary. When people argue their case, they are defending an opinion or standpoint, as we call it. They assume not to be shared by their addressee or by some third party the addressee might associate with. Otherwise, the argumentation would be pointless. The need for argumentation, the requirements of justification, and the structure of argumentation are all adapted to a context in which doubts, opposition, objections, and counterclaims arise. When theorizing about argumentation, it is vital to realize that the standpoints at issue in a difference of opinion can pertain to any kind of subject, and that these standpoints can be descriptive as well as evaluative or practical. In argumentative discourse, an evaluative judgment such as the film A Single Man is brilliant, or a practical prescription to do something like you should join me to that meeting, can be just as well at issue as a descriptive claim about a factual state of affairs, such as Copenhagen is much bigger than Amsterdam. Standpoints of any of these types and the argumentation to defend them can be encountered in all areas, from the family circle and the classroom to the field of law and the political arena. And it's imperative that the study of argumentation deals with argumentative practices in their full breadth. Not just in politics, but in every joint decision-making, even in the private sphere, argumentative discussions take place, or should take place, and they should play a crucial part. If we take this decision-making seriously, in all cases in which argumentation is used to defend a standpoint, a careful analysis and critical evaluation of the argumentative discourse is therefore required. The study of argumentation should provide the necessary conceptual tools for such analyses and critical evaluations. When it comes to the pivotal notion of argumentation, some striking differences can be observed between the meaning of the counterpart of the word argumentation in Dutch, in Dutch or other European languages, and all European languages in fact, and the meaning this word has in English. Because these differences can have significant consequences for the way in which argumentation is conceptualized, it's important to take note of them. The first noteworthy property of the equivalence of the English word argumentation in other languages is that they are immediately connected with trying to resolve a difference of opinion in a constructive way, by convincing the other people of the acceptability of one's standpoint. Unlike the word argumentation in English, these other words for argumentation have nothing to do with quarreling or other negatively charged verbal activities such as skirmishing, squabbling, bickering, wrangling and haggling. A second property that makes the non-English counterparts of argumentation different from the English word argumentation is that they refer as a rule only to the constellation of reasons put forward by an arguer in defense of his standpoint and not to the standpoint itself. A distinction is made here that is similar to the logical distinction between premises and conclusion. A third distinctive property is that the process product ambiguity, characterizing the theoretical term argumentation, is already inherent in the meaning of these non-English words for argumentation, whereas this is not so clearly the case in the ordinary use of the English word argumentation. Conceptually, the lexical meaning of the non-English counterparts of the word argumentation therefore constitutes a better basis for a theoretical definition of the theoretical term argumentation than that of the English word argumentation. What other conspicuous characteristics of argumentation must enter in this definition? Let me summarize 4 characteristics that seem vital to me because they have methodological consequences for the way in which argumentation research is to be conducted. There are many chairs left here, so you can all sit here. First, argumentation is a communicative act complex, which is realized in ordinary communication by functional verbal and sometimes non-verbal means. In the theorizing, this characteristic leads to the adoption of the methodological principle of what we call functionalization. Second, argumentation is an interactional act complex directed at other people. This makes argumentation part of an explicit or implicit dialogue. The accompanying methodological principle is what we call socialization. The third, argumentation means issuing in some way or other propositions that involve commitments for which one can be held accountable. The methodological principle that goes with it is what we call externalization. Fourth and last, argumentation involves by its constructive nature an appeal to reasonableness that derives its force from the idea of common critical standards. This leads to the adoption of the methodological principle of what we call dialectification. The methodological principles I have just mentioned are meta-theoretical in the sense that their adoption precedes the actual theorizing. They are part and parcel of my theoretical approach to argumentation. Functionalization is, in my approach, achieved by making use of the fact that argumentative discourse occurs in the first place through and in response to speech act performances. Identifying the complex speech act of argumentation and the other speech acts involved in resolving a difference of opinion makes it possible to specify the relevant what we call identity conditions and correctness conditions of these speech acts. In this way, for instance, a specification can be given of what is at stake in advancing a certain standpoint, so that it becomes clear what the disagreement space is and how the argumentative discourse is organized around this context of disagreement.